Absolutely.
Hey, do you remember that night? Okay, hear me out. I went back to that street. I was trying to review my memories of that night. A cold night in December. We were looking from above to the streetlights of live Brussels, debating over that strange sculpture on top of one of the buildings. Do you remember the elevator that we took? The small cafe next to it? What a night it was. Cozy, warm, what a cool jazz music we listened to. But guess what? It is closed now. There was a spray print on the glass. It said Mort de Touriste. Do you know what it means? Well, I googled and wow, it felt harsh. But do you recall seeing the gigantic building behind us when we were enjoying the view? There was a school nearby, crowded with parents waiting for their children. I took the other direction and found the ramps leading upward, avoiding the elevator this time. Soon, I stood in front of a massive classical facade with iron doors. They invited me to come close, to sneak a look inside. I was curious, what was going on here? The building looked abandoned, but not entirely. Plants were growing from cracks in the hard stone, pushing through. It felt almost apocalyptic. I turned my head and faced a row of housing units, modern, small. The architecture felt paradoxical compared to each other. I took the ramps all the way up. They gave a good view of the trusses of the houses. Standing on these classical ramps, feeling something monumental beneath my feet while looking into the ordinary, everyday life of the neighbors, I felt both connected and disconnected. Again, paradoxical. I remember walking past this incredibly massive building and seeing a protest happening around it. What really struck me were the layers of meaning the Palace of Justice seemed to carry. All across its monumental walls, there were graffiti messages, mostly in black, white, and red, expressing anger, resistance, and frustration. It felt like the building wasn't just a symbol of justice, but also of state power and the public's opposition to it. Brussels itself was full of charming architecture. Every street corner seemed to whisper its own story. But this building stood out not just because of its scale, but because of the contrast it created. Its grand architecture and symbolic authority juxtaposed with the presence of homeless people in the nearby sidewalks, heavy police presence, and the raw protest messages scrawled across its surfaces. For me, the Palace of Justice became a powerful visual metaphor for both institutional power and the public's struggle against it, especially among refugees and marginalized communities. Initially, when I got to know that you were going to ask a few questions about the building, I thought to myself that as someone who has lived in Brussels for a year and a half now, and also does quite a lot of exploring in the city, I would have a lot to say about the Great Palace of Justice. But then my mind went completely blank. I let the idea sink in for a few days, and then I thought about the part where you mentioned, basically, whatever comes to your mind, share it with me. And this whole process led me to realize that this building at the same time is and is not a big part of my encounters with the city, which is quite paradoxical when you consider the fact that it is one of the largest and tallest buildings in Brussels and was, at the time of its construction, the largest building in the world. I remember well, on my second day in Brussels, I visited Palace Pullard, and that was the first time I saw the huge dome under construction. I had no idea about the building or its significance back then, and even on that day, I was just looking at the not so amazing view overlooking the city, barely paying attention to the building itself. But from that day on, walking towards it from various other streets and angles, I started to notice that gigantic golden dome popping out of the clouds on those rainy, grey days of Brussels in October. Over time, it became harder and harder for me to perceive or even see the building separately from the scaffolding and the whole construction site around it. And whenever I could catch a glimpse of anything through the plastic sheets, I start imagining what it would feel like to explore this massive structure that almost feels like a city of its own. I saw a group of people heading towards the door. I had noticed the door before, but it didn't feel welcoming, more like an entrance for people in charge of the building, the ones who belonged. I knew the building functioned more as a courthouse than anything else, so I didn't allow myself easily approaching the entrance. I waited to see if they'd be turned away, but no one came back. Maybe I should try. The door was made of plywoods, like those used on construction sites. There was a security check, no questions, no tickets, and I was finally inside. I felt strange, a bit lost. I didn't exactly know where to go, so I wandered around. Somehow, I ended up in a massive hall with corridors all around. I looked up. The ceiling was sealed off with a drawing marking the location of the dome, which was still under reconstruction. I thought to myself, the dome is the center, the heart of the building. I hadn't expected to reach the heart so easily, so quickly. It made me question the scale of the place. From outside, it felt so much bigger. There were small pieces of furniture scattered around the hall. Lawyers were sitting, working on their laptops. Other people were waiting with their kids, impatient and tense. They didn't feel like tourists. They felt like people waiting for their verdicts. I was desperately tired, needing to sit on the benches with those cozy lamps beside them. The interior was quite dark, and the lamps created a warm, glowing atmosphere. But I didn't feel welcomed by the furniture. I felt I didn't belong. The hall was called the Hall of Lost Steps. Quite fitting. It took me a while to find the stairs. While looking, I passed lawyers waiting behind closed doors, ready to enter the courtroom. I was in awe of the architecture, moving through the space like a curious child trying to decode it. But they seemed unbothered by it. They worked there. It was familiar, almost invisible to them. They knew the space. They had gotten used to it. They were the people in charge. I felt uneasy, like I shouldn't be there, but their unbotheredness towards me made me feel more confident and easy. I kept going. I was starting to feel a bit nosy. Wherever I could go, I went. At one point, I found myself behind large leather doors with two circular windows. I peeked through. I saw a judge on duty. I was amazed. How am I here? No one else was. No one told me I shouldn't be here, or that I wasn't allowed. I quickly looked around for security cameras. None. I had intrusive thoughts. Can I just open the door and enter the trial? I quietly left the room, won the battle of my intrusive thoughts, trying to be respectful. But every moment felt like I was pushing the boundaries of space, constantly asking myself whenever I faced a new corridor or door, can I actually go here? Am I allowed? There were many days and late nights in the cold of the winter and the heat of the summer when I lingered around and chilled next to the stones of the Palace of Justice, looking over the mundane view of Brussels, alone and with friends. But the building itself was never part of the experience. Again, ironic and paradoxical. And that brings me back to my first point, the inaccessibility, both literal and visual, of such a massive physical presence. Of course, due to the never ending renovations. But that inaccessibility makes it feel like it doesn't even exist in the first place. And for me, that is how I feel about the Palace of Justice, a silent, ghostly giant that's lost its role in the play. And unless you walk up to it, you might just forget it even exists.